Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Impact Space Podcast, episode 2. I'm so excited to continue this journey. I'm here with my brother Mumbi. What's good, man?
What's up, brother? Good to be back and excited for what we have for everyone today.
Today's a good one because it's such a popular and common topic, especially for young players, which is how do I improve my game? Right? How do you improve as a player? Um, and we're gonna get into a bunch of those. That's of course a big topic, but we're gonna kind of narrow down into um, the different angles of that very rich, very nuanced conversation. Because we're talking about team training, we talk about individual training away from the team setting. We talk about getting ready for tryouts. All of these things are things that people are concerned with. So yeah, let's dive into that. But yeah, overall, sort of your thoughts in terms of this conversation about improving yourself as a player. What would you say would be step one, maybe?
I think step one has to be understanding what it is you want to improve. If you don't have a clear idea of what it is you want to improve, it's really hard to make any kind of progress, right? I feel like that makes sense. I don't know what you think, but for me, you have to know what it is you want to do, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, well, say more about that. Like, how do you
Well,
start that process?
Well, so you have to be reflective. Like, okay, I want to be a better dribbler, or I want to improve my first touch. Right? Those are very clear things that you want to improve. So there has to be a certain level of clarity there in terms of a vision. Okay, what do you see yourself doing better, or what do what is it that you've always wanted to do better? Whatever that idea is, you have to be clear about it, and then you can start to work on the steps to improving. But if you don't have a clear idea of what you want to do, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, no, I hear that. So step one is knowing yourself, right? Which is difficult to do because take being honest about your own performance in a settings as where people are as passionate as they are about soccer, like it can be tough. But yeah, step one is what am I good at, right? What am I good at? Uh, and then based on that, it's important that we say this. Like you have to improve your strengths, right? You have to improve your strengths. People don't make teams based on what they can't do, right? They make a team based on the abilities that they have that stand out that will allow them to contribute to the team's intentions. So, um, yeah. What else? What else?
Do you think those two steps though are one and two, or what's your thought process on that? Like if I say I have to have a clear idea of what I want to do better, right? Do you think that goes um, underneath what you just said of, oh, here's what you need to um, you- what do you think about that? Well, let's back up. Like, do you think that it's a one and two? Is
No,
that how you think of it?
well, it depends in terms of the reflection part of it.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to. Well, the reflection isn't just necessarily just like sit down for an hour in a dark room and think,
No,
long and
of
hard
course
about
not.
it. But
No.
what we really mean is be honest about the environment that you're in and where you fit in, right? So you're playing, so a player, because this happens, right? We're both coaches in this setting, and this happens where players will come up to us and say, "Coach, how can I get better?" Right? This is typically what happens, right? And all I'm saying is that player who says that, what my reply has been always to sort of take that, kind of pluck that question out of midair and turn it back to the player to say, look, because keep in mind, a lot of times I might be seeing this player for the first time or second time. I've gotten this question from players at like a trial where they say, hey, what can I improve on? And I go, well, I'm just seeing you for the first time. You know yourself better than I know you. So I think part of it is reflecting. The player has to understand and take ownership for, how they and keep in mind before we're talking about players who are like, just to put a number on it, let's say older than 9 or 10, right? We're not talking about like a 3 or 4 year old here, right? There's a sweet spot here that we're talking about because you've been playing for a while and you've developed a certain way of navigating the space, right, of a soccer field. And I'm saying now you have to know at that age already, 9, 10, whatever, oh, this is something I'm good at, right? Whatever aspect that is. I'm really good at beating players on the dribble, for example, if that's your thing. Okay? You got to know that about yourself and improve, and then seek to improve those qualities, but then also see the things, areas maybe that you're not so good at. I'm really good at beating players on the dribble. It's harder for me to see a pass or connect with teammates over a greater distance. Do you see what I mean? And that's a process that you have to engage in with the help of course, your coaches in your home environment.
And I was just going to add that process sometimes can be a bit difficult, right? Because you have to have a coach or coaches or maybe a director that can give you that feedback. And if that feedback isn't given, it can be really, really hard. I think the other thing too is players need to be able to receive that feedback on a daily basis. I think one of the issues is that now that we have these bigger clubs, these bigger organizations, sometimes that process of evaluation comes after 3, 6 months, sometimes 9 months. And then now you're starting a new season and you had maybe 1 or 2 meetings or 1 or 2 evaluations about a player. And so sometimes we think, oh, that 3-month evaluation, what did they tell me? But there might have been things that you've been coached or you've been told over the course of that 3 months, every training session or every week. And so I think it's on the player and on the parents to have a dialogue weekly about these things. Hey, what did you work on at practice? What did your coach tell you? What did your coach tell the team, right? What did the coach say that you guys were working on? Okay, these are conversations that are meaningful that you don't have to be, if you're a parent, for example, you don't have to be an expert. I think you just have to ask questions and bounce off one another and say, okay, what did you guys work on at training? And if the kid says, I don't know, well, then there might be an issue there. Maybe, I don't know. Was it clearly communicated? Or was the kid maybe not paying attention? And I don't know. So at that point, we have to be receptive to the feedback every single day. I can't stress that enough. I think sometimes we wait for the evaluation after 3 months, and then we miss all the coaching that we received on the daily. And so that's what I would say. I don't know what you think about that, if that makes sense or...
No, absolutely, it makes sense because it's in line with research on feedback loops and the importance of, when you talk about skill development, skill acquisition, or any type of learning, the importance of feedback that is as immediate as possible, right? So in a sweet spot, right? The point you made is 100% true in terms of, if the only feedback a player receives is after 3 or 4 months and they've already been at a club, and they get what, in this, we've all been in environments where this has happened, right? And we've done this. They get a checklist of things maybe that they do, right? Or like a generic rubric of their player profile split into commonly 4 categories, right? You'll see technical, you'll see tactical, you'll see physical, and maybe like a psychological component or something else like that. And then they'll be graded, they'll be scored. And it's like, okay, but does this really encapsulate me as a player, 1? And 2, how does this actually help me with, to your point, the day-to-day process of learning to be better at the sport, right, in conjunction with my teammates? And that's the piece that certainly coaches, administrators, parents need to be more intentional with, how that feedback is delivered. And with players, this is where, okay, now you talk about immediate feedback being important. That's why the reflection piece is important, because that's free. And you can do that after every single session, right? You should be doing that. I mean, we do that anyway, but if we don't learn, and that's a skill, right, that can be developed, is how to reflect, how to process your own performance. And I'm sure we'll have a podcast, I'm sure, that'll get into that on a deeper level. But this is where I challenge players to, keep a journal, or keep a little soccer diary or whatever, or note things down, that even something as simple as, seemingly simple maybe, as writing down after you've had a really great performance, right? Writing down exactly how that felt and what you did leading up to that allowed you to have that performance. Why? Because then you just created a model for yourself. And now when you're going into a big game or a tryout or whatever, it's how the question that you have to answer for yourself is, what do I need to do to get myself into this state to have that same performance? And then you start to build those models for yourself. You become more prepared as a player.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it's the responsibility of clubs to help players with that process, whether
100%.
it's an individual coach or, a broader, game model where you have a piece and say, hey, this is how you evaluate yourself, right? Because we know that you may ask us what you need to do better, but before you ask us that question, here's the process you need to do. Go, and then come back to us and ask us again, and let's have a dialogue. Do you think that should be done?
Absolutely. And here's the trick: is what we just said about the feedback being given after several months, right? And again, I've been at clubs that have done this, but imagine how the conversation would change. And in a lot of environments, so like a pro academy environments, and the feedback's different, right? Maybe because you could say they have the time and resources to do it, but this is where I would challenge any youth club that serves kids, and every parent should demand that their club is on the cutting edge of this stuff, because again, this is research backed, right? This is objective in terms of how people learn. If we know that it's better to provide feedback, more incrementally, and also more immediate, that's actionable, right? So I do something, hey, I'm giving some feedback, and then I try to do it again now that I can apply it. If we know that that's best for the learner, right, in this case the young player, then that should be the model with which we try to use at clubs, so that when it comes then time for the sit downs, I understand you can't have a sit down with your kids every single day with every single player on your team. And I know coaches are sometimes working with 2-3 teams. I get that. These are the constraints. But now, once you do get to that evaluation period or whatever, what do they call them? Like check-in periods or whatever. Now, but the conversation then changes, right? Because the conversation can become more rich, because instead of a top-down, me, the coach, mastermind, trying to fill you with knowledge, that's not the way it is. It's us having a conversation about the process that you as a young player have been engaged with, and that we as a club have helped you with and have facilitated. So absolutely, that's a different. But you see how that requires that requires a lot of intentionality to set up, and it requires people to know about sort of the teaching process.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be even more reflective of what parents and what kids go through in a week, before a session, after a session, just how long a week is school and work and juggling all these things. And this is why I think it can be difficult to get players to think this way, right? Because there's so much going on. And so I'm not going to say people don't try, but what I would say is that because there's so much going on, we say, we'll get to it. And no, this is why we have the evaluation after 3 months, because everyone's busy and everyone's running around. But I think that, if this foundation is set at the beginning of a season, and you sit everybody down and say, hey, here's how you need to evaluate yourself. And we will do check-ins, but they're not going to be these formal 30-minute, 45-minute check-ins, but I might just ask you a question before training starts. What is it that you're going to control today? What is it that you as a player are working on today, right? Here's our topic. Here's what the team's going to do, but you as an individual, there should be 2 or 3 things. Maybe sometimes there's just one thing that you need to focus on, and this is what you're going to reflect on after the session. That would be so much more powerful. And that, I think, you talked about the journaling. If you say, hey, just write down one thing from the session. It doesn't have to take an hour. Yes, you have homework. Yes, you have, family obligations and things to do, but write down something from today, right? And then after that 2-3 month period, you check in and say, hey, what do your journal entries say, right? Did you work on what you wanted to work on in the session? Were you consistent? Do you know what you do consistently well, right? Do you know what you struggled with? And I think that at that point, now you're, like you said, you're in a much better place than like you said, where I'm just, as the coach, given the sole responsibility of, let me just give you these marks. But how do I even do that for each player? Say I have 15 players in my team. for each player every single day over the course of 3 months, that's almost nearly impossible. Unless I have a staff helping me in a pro setting that are taking data, that are watching sessions, that are watching film, that are at games taking notes, like that's a lot of work, you know?
No, yeah, and it's kind of outdated, and it's or not, at least we could say, not conducive to the learning process. The conversation, of course, naturally for us is kind of veered into coaches and that setup, but when it comes to now the youth player, right, and kids who are listening to this, ask, okay, but I get all that, and that's what can I do to actually improve my game? This is where now we can start to narrow and get deeper, right? So we already said, first of all, reflect and know what you're good at, right? Know what you're good at and improve that what you're good at, because that's how you solve problems on the field is important and it's unique to you in a way. So own that and improve that. What else would you then, I guess, counsel younger players to help them become better?
Part of it would be to be resourceful. Okay, I think that there's lots of places where they can get feedback. If I want to learn how to, strike a ball better, if I want to learn how to cross a ball better, find a wall, right? Strike a ball against a wall. I would say go out to the field whenever you can, if you have that access. Find a green patch and strike a ball into the goal. I would ask, for whether it's feedback from a coach maybe on hey, do you know any exercises or drills I can do to improve ball striking? Or you know what I mean? And so I think that those are some small, simple steps. YouTube's a great tool. Kids are on the internet and on social media a lot, and there's so many accounts or there's so many channels that put this information out there. Like, hey, here's how you strike a ball. Here's how you finish. Watch those videos, that can give you some more insight on what you need to improve and how you need to improve those things.
Yeah, no, it's great. You have to, at some point, build your sanctuary as a young player, right? And what I mean by that is, because let's be real, man, we have to give grace to these young athletes. They do face a lot of challenges, and time is a constraint.
Yeah.
You have school, and if you're playing club or wherever you're playing, like, and you train 3-4 days, you got all those demands. You have family demands, of course, friends and family demands. So it's like, where do you find the time? And to your point, be resourceful. Now, also playing with the constraints that you do have is part of the challenge of, owning your process. So I'll give you an example. So something that I would like to see, and if I was coaching, I'm currently not coaching at a youth club, really, right? And I have other jobs, but if I was, I would counsel the parents to help their young players develop a friend network that they could go out and play at parks with, right? Informally. And like street ball. And I know a lot of kids nowadays have cell phones as young as, some elementary school kids walking around with cell phones. But the point is, if you have to take lessons and take notes from case studies from all around the world of top players. When you research top players and how they grew up, there's similar threads, right? In the sense of, we had a group of us who would always play after school
In the neighborhood. Yeah.
We would always play in the neighborhood. We would always do this. We would always do that. Folks have to build that kind of sanctuary for each other, even if it's just 2 or 3 or 4 of you. Obviously, ideally, it's 6 or 8 of you, right? So you can play 3v3, 4v4. But even outside of that, if it's just you and a buddy, right? You have a good buddy who you go out and play with. Now, you can set up little challenges for one another, right? All right, let's play this little foot volley game over this park bench, or let's we're gonna to your point about learning how to strike a ball. We're gonna play. There's a target, and we're gonna play. First to hit that target like 4 times wins or something. And now we're working on striking the ball. These types of games, and notice they're games. It's fun, and you're playing with a friend. It checks all the things that bring people to this sport, which is the community aspect of it. Kids play because they want to be with their friends, but also the skill acquisition in a in a non-linear way. And what I mean by that, it's a fancy way of just saying there's constant repetition without repetition in a way, or it's you're getting high reps because or meaningful reps because of the adaptability that you have to have.
There's freedom.
Because the environment, because the environment is such, right, that you're playing in a park, so you're playing on a concrete surface, or you have to try to do things in a way that isn't like sanitized, it isn't just like perfect, and you're just more robotic about it. Set up that kind of environment for yourself. And I don't know how many players, I know players do it, but I don't know if we encourage it enough.
Yeah, I would say that it needs to be encouraged a lot more. I would say when I look at the greater culture of the game in this country, there's a lot of structure. And so the more we can get out of that structure and have players doing things on their own, that would be great. I know that, growing up, one of the things that I was lucky enough to do, and maybe you remember this, is mom and dad did such a great job of creating that network in teams. And so there were guys that I played with that lived maybe 5-10 minutes away. And we would link up and say, oh, we're going to go to so-and-so's house and play in the backyard. I remember doing that. I can shout out so many people. There was Jason, lived 10 minutes away, and we'd go to Jason's house and we'd play one-on-one in the backyard. And he had a goal. We'd shoot on the goal. Or some days, he would come to our yard was a little bit bigger and the surface was, a little bit flatter, and we'd play in our yard and set that up. There was literally a day where I remember our neighbors had a close friend that played in a team that played in our league. And this kid was over one day and happened to actually bring a friend of a friend. I think they all went to school together. That friend also played on that team. So I remember Jason and I played 2v2. And we were 11 years old.
In our backyard?
In our yard, yeah. We played 2v2 against kids we played in the league. And it happened organically, but they were there like, hey, are you guys play for that team? I'm like, oh yeah, you guys play for, all right, hey, let's play. We got a yard, we got some goals. I think we put down some cones, or maybe we had some pugs, and we played. And I vividly remember that. I was like, whoa, that was cool. That was really, really cool. It was fun, it was competitive, and we made it what it was. It was our initiative in setting that up. I think more of that needs to happen. It's such an awesome thing, and when I reflect on it, I actually did that a lot as a kid, which was so much fun.
No, and so for folks who are just tuning in or who missed our first episode, here with my brother Mumbi, and there's 9 years difference between us, right? And I remember I have similar stories, but maybe also by the time when you were doing that, where was I? I was college or something. I was going.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what I'm talking about. And that's a common thread of all players who reach a certain level. That has to be there, right, in some form or fashion. And for folks who, we started this episode with, okay, how do I improve as a player? Whether you or Jason or whoever was over at the house, you weren't thinking about that, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but you weren't thinking about that like, oh we're training right now. Like, we're getting
no.
Better. You were thinking of it like, yo, we're playing, we're hanging out, we're playing ball.
Yeah, that's how we hung out. Yeah, that was it.
The beauty of it, you're learning, you are improving because you're playing, right? Or let me back up. If you do it intentionally and you which you guys did, and you're competitive, right? Because let's be very clear, you can play just because you play at a certain level. This is maybe another podcast episode we could have, but just because you're playing in a pickup game, for example, or you're playing with certain people, doesn't necessarily mean you're improving, because it depends on the quality of that game. Let's be very clear. If you go out and you play in a game and you're playing, let's say you're a 12-year-old superstar at your club, and you're playing against 9-year-olds who are not that great, and you're kind of walking around, that's not necessarily improving your game for it. So I just want to be clear about that. But generally speaking, you're playing against people of like ability, and you're doing it organically. Yeah, you're improving. You're helping yourself see the game, and you're working on skills, and it's so important. So, players, if you're listening to this, set up your learning sanctuary. Let's put it that way. Set up a learning sanctuary for yourself, right? Which means get friends and play with your friends outside of team training, and set up that community. And if you need parent help, if you encourage your parents to set up play dates where they can leave you guys alone, go to
Yeah.
a park, and play street soccer. I want to see parks overtaken with kids playing on basketball courts that are not being used, or even tennis courts that are not being used. I know sometimes there's signs that say don't use them. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but more of that, more street ball, right? It has to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think, on that note, again, just to flip this, I know we're talking about the player and centering on the player. Do you think this is something that clubs can help with?
100%. 100%. But it takes honestly it takes some courage for the clubs to do it too. And what I mean by that is
Because it's outside of the box?
yes, and they would have to relinquish some control.
I was going to say,
over
release the
development-
players. Yeah.
over the
Uh-huh.
developmental process, and thinking that everything that they're doing on the weekdays is helping their kids on the weekend, right? And here's the thing: we don't even have to go far for this example, bro. Right? You remember, and there are people that I'm sure will see this who remember. Remember the group that I coached at a club in 2015, I believe, 2015, 2016. We're not going to name the club, although, right? But and do you remember we had 3 training sessions? And you remember because you used to come out every now and then.
I was around, yeah.
You were around. What were you in? Were you in high school at that point? College.
No, college.
College. All right. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so I'm the head coach of this team, and you would come out every now and then and just help out, be around, and you were great. We had 3 training sessions. What were they? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, let's say, or Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, whatever they were. Do you remember what we used to do on one of those days?
Yeah, free play. It was usually the middle session was free play.
Describe it. What did we do?
So literally, quite literally, you would just bring the gear. You would bring the balls, you bring the cones, bring the mini goals. We had the training space, and you sat, and you and I would sit and watch. And the players knew, obviously, the first time you introduced it, you had to explain it, but the
we
players
set the parameter.
would set up their own game, and then they would play, and we would just sit there and watch. That was it.
How much fun were those sessions for the players?
They had a blast. I mean, the feedback we got, but also just watching them. Sometimes you don't have to even have a conversation about these things. When you're just watching them, you know, they were smiling, they were laughing, and that's what matters the most. And it, you know, honestly, I can also reflect and say that the parents were bought into it. You know, they would come by and watch, and it was fun for them. They knew what you were doing, so it made sense.
I communicated.
You communicated it, yeah, and they were on board. And honestly, now if we were to talk about outcomes, because people care about that as well, when you saw them play on the weekend, that same joy was there, you know. But also, you saw players that they could solve problems that much better, so much more efficiently, because they were getting those extra touches on the ball, because they were getting, you know, that, you know, you call it that time on task, right? They're playing, it's competition, right? And so they're constantly making decisions that they would make in a game. They're constantly in situations that they're, you know, that they would see in a game. So that learning for them, I'm not going to say, oh, there couldn't be a better way to do it, but that was a really, really amazing way for them to learn and experience the game and have fun.
And let's be clear, it's not like when we had when there were more coaching interventions in the other trainings, so the days that weren't this free play day, that it's not like that play wasn't there or that the joy was taken away, right? This was all part of the package in terms of what we were doing, what I was doing with those kids. And yes, the feedback, I say how much fun I led with, how much fun was it for the players, because that's, to me and for any coach, right, that has to be at front of our mind, right? Youth coaches, is this fun for the players? Because if it's not fun, why do it? Why?
Yeah.
Right? So if I lead with that, you're already, as a coach, if I lead with that, I'm already off to a good start. Now, also when we're talking about this umbrella, the umbrella topic of how do I improve as a player, you as a player also have to enjoy it. You have to enjoy the process of getting better. Because if you don't enjoy that process, and it's a messy process and it's a difficult process at times, then you have a ceiling on you, right? You have a lower ceiling on you than a player who I enjoy this. that group that we're talking about, and maybe I will shout out some names, right? Again, I won't mention the club per se, but I will shout out names of guys like, you look at a Yusuf. You remember Yusuf in those sessions? Little Yusuf, and the joy with which, and the things he tried, and everybody knew. And the other beautiful thing about that, so when we talk about leading with joy, the second part of that is learning, right? Joy and learning. And I've, mentors that I follow, for example, I gotta shout out like Todd Bean at Tovo. Obviously, like someone that I look at, and the way that he approaches teaching. There are others, right? But learning with joy, or leading with joy, and then having learning. If you got those two as pillars, you're off to a great start. And the feedback comes from the players in many different ways, right? In terms of the quality of a session or the quality of an environment. Because in that environment, you mentioned you could watch the players and you could see in that free play day what they were doing. Here's the other piece of it. Where do you think those players, Yusuf, Coda, right, Alejandro,
Chino,
Ben, yeah, all these guys, Jesse, Jackson, Trey, like, I can name so many guys, Kaito. Where do you think, in terms of learning about, and this is a good segue to another piece of, right, that we're going to talk about, in terms of learning about each other and learning about their own abilities and each other, where do you think they were learning? From me or from the pickup game itself?
from the game itself, because we didn't intervene on that day. There's nothing that we're telling them to do or not do. So if Chino wants to shoot from 40 yards, he's going to shoot from 40 yards. And we have video of him doing it in the game. So players know, oh, he's going to shoot, right? So, I mean, that's what you would see from them is now, oh, this player wants to try things. They are inventive. Maybe a player like Ethan Liu, oh, Ethan's going to play in 1 and 2 touch because that's Ethan. He's simple. He's calm on the ball. He's never going to give it away. That's Ethan. So in the game, he also does the same thing. So they would all learn from each other. Jackson, he sometimes goes left. He sometimes goes right. Sometimes he'll take 4 or 5 touches. Sometimes he'll play in 1 and play around the corner and then try to combine. So Jackson does everything. So they would learn from each other. That isn't something that we or you specifically as the head coach had to tell them or teach them or draw on a board or show them video. Could you do those things? And did you do those things at times? Sure you did, of course. But again, you learn from experiencing, right? We can talk about the game all we want. It's the experience where that joy comes from and, like you said, where the learning comes from.
Yeah, my big takeaway is that, and maybe I asked a bad question or I kind of answered it, but my big takeaway too from that experience was the value that they got from setting up and owning their own game is priceless. And that's the point, right? Is that so when we talk about what you can do as a player to get better, naturally what we're talking about is owning your own development, right? Not waiting for a coach, not waiting for it. Now, thankfully, we knew enough to set up an environment in which we kind of help them get that accountability for themselves. But you're 100% right. Now, when they're playing in those games, they don't have the coach to lean on in terms of, oh, coach, this is happening. Solve it. Right? They got into it sometimes. It was these sessions, the beautiful thing, we learned a lot. I learned a lot, right, from stepping back and watching them, because it also helped me learn about how different players solve things, right? Which we constantly are trying to figure out anyway, but you're like, oh, this player likes to do this, or this player approaches conflict this way. Or this player, I got to shout out Yusuf again, because he's one of the kids that I really enjoyed, because a certain aspect of his play came out in those sessions that, again, not that they didn't come out in other sessions, but that often that might go missing if you're not really looking for it, right? Because he not only was he a smaller player, but he constantly did things that would annoy guys.
Feisty player.
That would be deemed on the edge of the rules. And here's the thing is, that's beautiful because you want him to sort of experience that and his teammates to experience that. And to learn from that, we talk about the feedback loop. He's learning from it in a way that's more powerful than if I say it. If one of his teammates calls him out on something that he is doing or whatever, it's more powerful. And not like he was a little, I say this in the most loving way possible. He was sometimes an annoying player for guys to play against. 1, because he was so good, but 2, because he was incessant. Right? He was incessant. And what a beautiful way to sort of have him express that. You know what I mean?
And to come full circle to how we started this conversation about the player, right? We want to center the player and how can you improve? How can you get better? That reflection of knowing yourself. Yusuf knew he was a smaller player.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So there's certain ways he had to move and there's certain things that he had to do. Like, for example, he didn't want to get pushed around, so he has to give a little bit back. You don't always learn that in a structured environment. You learn it through playing. Right. And so you got to learn, okay, well, I'm smaller. A lot of guys are bigger than me. So either I have to be really, really good on the ball, which he got even better than he already was technically. Yeah. And then the other thing was he had to add another piece to his game, which he figured out was, oh man, I have to be tougher. Right? I have to shield the ball better. I have to protect the ball better. And then when I don't have it, I need to be ferocious in trying to win it back. And that was him. Right. And so that's awesome. You learn that through play. You learn it through play. And so he develops that identity and he's reflecting whether he realizes it or not, because then when he comes back the next week, he's even better than he was the week before, which was awesome to see that players were improving in that way. So,
and the feedback, just to be candid, to wrap a bow on that experience, but the feedback that the players gave at the end of both seasons I was with them was they loved those days, right? Those were some of their favorite days where they would do that. Like they have, and I've talked to guys now as they've all grown and they're in college and graduating from college, and it's like they really enjoyed that. So when we go back to what club's responsibility and what parents' responsibility is, set up an environment where your kids love to play and from the game.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It is difficult because of the constraints. But then we have to navigate that, and then we have to let some things go. The things that I let go of to help the players experience that was this need to have control of, every single moment that we were together during the course of the week, which for a coach, I get it, sometimes can be a challenge, but that's something that coaches have to reflect on and say, is this about me having this control, or is this about the players experiencing this kind of environment, this kind of learning sanctuary? Use that word.
Even as we come back to the player and to the parents, creating that community, creating that space for one another. Whenever you get a chance, because again, the weeks are busy and people have places to be and things to do, right? But if you can sit down, parent and child, and figure out, hey, can we call so-and-so or, email 2-3 families on our team, or maybe that I go to school with. Can we set up a date a week from now, 2 weeks from now? Plan ahead so that you have something nailed down and say, hey, for an hour, we're going to meet at the park. Okay, so-and-so is going to bring cones. So-and-so is going to bring balls. Oh, and so-and-so parents are going to bring some snacks. And we're just going to hang out and you guys are going to play, right? So do it maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks ahead. I know everybody's got a busy schedule, but if you plan far enough ahead in advance, then you have a system, right? And you get feedback. Hey, how did that go? Did you guys have fun? Did you enjoy it? Okay, great. Let's talk and we'll plan something for 2 weeks from now, right? And then there you go. Now you've created a community. Now you've created a space for yourself. So that's, in terms of action steps, I would definitely recommend doing that.
In terms of going deeper now, there's another element to this. So players ask, how can I get better? In terms of, so we've gone over knowing what you're good at, right? Reflecting on that, creating a learning sanctuary for yourself. Another aspect that I want to get your take on is now within a team setting, right? So knowing yourself and then creating a learning sanctuary away from team training are kind of more individual things. Or now when you come to the team training and how do I get better, like on a certain team or whatever, how would you approach that conversation or with a young player who asks that, like, what can I do to become better on any given team?
I think what I would start with is, yes, that conversation of what do you do well, and use that as a base. But then now when we talk about how you play with others, I think one of the things that I would probably next ask, and I would love your thoughts on this, would just be, what is your role in the team, or what are your roles and responsibilities on the team? And so that could be something that is from a character standpoint, but then also now we're specifically talking about from a playing standpoint. So if you are a winger, what is your role in that team, right? The winger in one team is not going to be the same as the winger in another team. So in your team, for your coach, what is your role? What is your responsibility? In the attack, what are you supposed to do? What does your coach want you to do? In defense, what does your coach want you to do? If in defense he says, nope, stay high, okay, stay high, right? So if for that reason, if he says stay high and you're dropping deeper, maybe you're not serving the team in the best way. So that's something you have to be reflective of. And maybe you need to check in with the coach, say, hey, what do you need me to do again? What am I supposed to be doing? And once you have that clarity, now you can reflect for yourself, oh, in that game, I needed to stay higher. I wasn't doing that. I was oftentimes in the midfield. I was oftentimes with the back line. No, I need to stay higher, right? So I think understanding what your role is or roles are and what your responsibilities are, and how that's communicated from the coach to you, the player individually, but also to the team.
Okay, yeah. So understanding team intentions. Let's say you're at a tryout now. You're getting ready. How do I stand out at a tryout? That's a common question.
I like to throw that one back to players when they ask me that personally. And the reason I do is because I'm genuinely interested in what they have to say. And a lot of players will list things that they think will help them stand out, right? So a lot of players will say, oh, I gotta dribble, I gotta beat players. I gotta score goals. When I hear that, I'm like, okay, great. But then sometimes you ask a player, okay, well, what do you do well? And it's not those things. So I could be talking to a center back, right? Like, okay, is that something you do on your own normally? Are those things that you're good at, or are those things that you're asked to do in your environment where you are, right? So if I don't know those things, then it's going to be harder to stand out. So first and foremost, I would say that you have to be yourself, right? So whatever you do well, whatever you know, that's what you should be trying to show, right? Because it's really hard to play outside of yourself, right? It's really hard to say, hey, I'm a player that plays 1 and 2 touch, but today I'm going to take everybody on. I'm going to try to dribble through 4 or 5 people. That's going to be really, really difficult. And then your level of success probably won't be too high. You're not used to doing that. You're not proficient in doing that. So why would you think that you're going to be able to just do that, on a random day now when you have that pressure of a tryout? So I don't know what your take is on that, but that's what I feel.
Yeah, no, there's when you step back and you realize this sport is it's a social sport, and it's obviously a team invasion sport, right? We have a group of us and we're trying to invade a certain space with the ball, and we have a group on the other side that's trying to stop us, right? Now, in that, folks have to understand, if you and I are playing on the same team, us understanding one another is like just as if not more important, you could say more important, than us understanding the opponent, right? Because and really that's the battle, is essentially how well do you and I understand one another compared to how well the opponent understands each other, the individuals on that team. And now these two, I guess, ways of understanding are clashing each other, and that's right, the different styles and whatever. So my point in saying all that is to say we have to do a better job, of course, as coaches, to prime players to think this way. And players have to also reflect on how well do they know the capabilities of their teammates, because that impacts directly the way they behave or should behave, and the requisite success that they have in any given aspect of the game, right? And I'll use an example from the highest level of the game, Thierry Henry, and we've spoken about this example, right? Thierry Henry has a great clip, for folks who don't know, some younger people may be watching this, legendary Arsenal, also FC Barcelona and French national team player. One of the best who's ever played, in my opinion. Amazing in his prime, just incredible player. And he has an incredible clip where he talks about speaking with Arsene Wenger, Arsenal's manager at the time, about Henry's frustration with a teammate who wouldn't pass him the ball in training when he made a certain run. And Henri's like goes into Wenger's office and he's like, yeah, this guy won't pass me the ball, when I make this run, like what's going on? And then Wenger turns around and he says, okay, but can he see you? And Henri's like, what do you mean can he see me? He's got eyes. Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking? I don't understand. And Wenger's like, well, this particular player, can he see you make that run? And he's like, what do you? And then it sunk in with him, and eventually they started talking. And what basically the point that Wenger was saying to Henri is, you're making this run, but you're not respecting or reflecting on the qualities that this player has, which means that he doesn't necessarily see that run that you're making the same way that another player on this team sees. And Henri had to think, and he's like, oh, shoot, that makes sense. Okay. So instead,
And then
when this player, and this is the light bulb moment, and this is what I want young players to take away from this, right? And if a player like Thierry Henry struggles with this, again, this should give you reflection and pause, but also encouragement that what you're struggling with is no different, because we all struggle with this. This is the nature of the game, right? The players at the highest level struggle with this, right? Because the game is about communication. It's about understanding, right? And responding to cues and anticipating cues and then whatever. So Henri's saying, I started to change the way I made runs based on the player receiving the ball and who had the ball. Imagine that. So now, going back to that legendary Arsenal team, let's say when Ljungberg got the ball, Henri would make a different run. When Vieira or Cesc got the ball, he knew he could make a different run, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, young player, imagine if we help them understand that. Oh, when this player gets it, I need to come a little bit closer to him because he may only see a certain distance, or his qualities allow him to maybe play in this range. That player can play more globally, so I can run in behind. Now you're processing the game on a different level, and you are supporting the qualities of your teammates. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it requires that you're thinking beyond yourself, though, right? Like you can't just think about me, because in theory, in the game, you can't. You have 10 other people that you're sharing the field with, and so you have to start thinking, what about them? Sometimes it's easy as a player to get frustrated with one of your teammates if you're not reflective of yourself. Like, oh, no, but that player, like you said, that player struggles to play longer balls. So I'm screaming and jumping for a 30, 40-yard ball. That player can't play a 30, 40-yard ball.
Can't play that, yeah.
So I need to either come closer, or I need to trust that they're going to play with a player that's closer to them who can then maybe hit that switch, or then they'll link to a player and then now the ball will come to me. But it maybe can't come directly from that player. So absolutely, you have to learn what your teammates do well and also what they struggle with, because then that informs how you're going to play with them and respond to them. Absolutely.
Well, listen, man, any other last thoughts on this for now before we wrap up?
No, it's just, it's really good stuff, I think, for players to think about. If you want to get better, reflect if you want to get better.
Yeah, so we believe in the power of three things here. So leaving them with three things, it would be, one, reflect on things that you're good at, improve what you're good at. Two, create a learning sanctuary, right, away from team training. Whether that's you and a ball and a wall, which obviously has to be there, but then also you and some friends to create, rich learning games. And then three, reflect, learn, start to see the game through other people's eyes, right? Start to see the game based on how other people play and solve problems. Learn what your teammates are good at so that you can improve the way you interact with them. If you do those three things, you'll improve as a player, especially if you do them intentionally and if you have fun, which is what we're here for as well, right? This is fun. We enjoy this. We're getting better. Obviously, we're not perfect at this process, but hopefully people are enjoying the journey thus far. We got some more exciting things for you. And in our next episode, or maybe next couple, we'll have an exciting guest who will be able to talk about this from another level of experience. So look out for that. I'm really excited for that. But Mumbi, pleasure as always. And till next time, everyone, Thank you for joining us on the Impact Space podcast. Be safe. Enjoy playing. We'll see you next time.